When many of us think of the wise woman, we think of her as a native elder. But does that archetype exist as a frequency resonance within all women? What does it look like within the Western cultural context? And do you have to be a certain age to access that resonance? In today's discussion, we talk about the power of the wise woman, what it can look like in everyday life, and what can be done to embody it more. And after the discussion, we get to the most important part of this episode. The group frequency calibration associated with this episode is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. So be sure to listen to that. Without releasing distortion patterns targeted by the GFC, the change you want will be more difficult to attain because you haven't addressed the root of the issue. If you like this episode, please subscribe by clicking on the red button. My name is Karen Cheong, and today in Mastering Your World Through Frequencies, we're discussing the rise of the wise woman.
I always get intrigued when I hear that phrase, wise woman. Because immediately what I do is I put her outside and I imagine an elder, an Indigenous elder.
Right.
And it becomes something really unobtainable for me.
Yeah.
And it's really only of late that I've recognized that, wait a minute, I'm feeling that little bit of frequency inside of myself.
Yeah.
I just haven't explored it enough. I'm wondering if it's a frequency resonance thing, or if it's just a stage in life that I'm only starting to move into now. And I'd really like to understand it, because I've got to tell you, if it is the wise woman inside I'm experiencing that I'm seeing outside, does that make sense? It's really lovely, and I'd love to have more of it.
Yeah, totally.
So the wise woman always has been for me a woman that's outside on myself, and she's always been on a pedestal, kinda, and it's always been an Indigenous elder. For some reason, there doesn't seem to be a white wise woman for me, you know, and maybe it's because in our society we have kind of emasculated ourselves a little bit. Maybe that's how I'm seeing it, but that's been my experience of it. And so when I've met these, how I call wise women elders, it's always been outside, and I haven't been able to reach that until maybe lately, where I've started to feel that, I think it's a flow or a current, or I guess a resonance, of this wise woman that's inside of me. But it's only very briefly, and there's moments, and they're so beautiful.
Yeah.
So I want more of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because it's really peaceful.
Yeah.
So I know you're going to say it's all come to frequency work, but can we talk a little bit about that wise woman that's inside of us?
Yeah, totally. So for those of you who aren't aware of the wise woman archetype, Fiona and I did a whole episode on the journey of the feminine. And we talked about that archetype there. So if you don't know what we're talking about, then I would go refer to that. Okay. But we're specifically talking about the archetype of the wise woman. And it's in part, a lot of people will think that the wise woman is something that you get to just naturally as you get older as a woman.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah? So it's like you hit a certain age, then all of a sudden you hit wise womanness. But for those of us who are at the appropriate age now, for the wise woman, it can often feel like we can't embody her because we don't know what really she is. We don't have a lot of models of that in our culture. And so it's like, well, what is that resonance? Is it within all of us? And to me, it's sort of like, well, what impedes us from embodying that more? Because there's a lot that can. So what I'll say is that the wise woman frequency resonance is in part like layered in with age to some degree. So and what I will say, it's impressive to me to see some younger women who have that very much within them. So it doesn't have to do with age, is my point. It can do with age, but also I'm noticing that in younger women. So meaning women who have a different kind of awareness of themselves in their 20s, for example, when that's not really that present usually at that time. So my point is it doesn't have to be associated with age, and it often can be. To me, it has to do with a certain resonance. So not age specific. So for some of us, we have to, and myself included, you have to, at least for me, have the journey of life, you know, to have the experiences, to have the time to reflect, to have the growth of oneself, to witness that, to see your impact on others. All that sort of stuff needed to happen for me, to be able to start to honestly feel like I was enough, to notice that resonance within me.
Yeah, that is key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once I was able to feel enough love for myself as the human, as well as understanding the higher aspect of myself, that's true. That's when I started to feel, oh, I do have a wise woman inside of me.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like that wise woman aspect is because of her experience and her wisdom. She is able to be with more. You know what I mean? She's more accepting of, and I'm calling her she because it's the archetype of the feminine, but she's able to be with more. So it's sort of like, even if there's a group of people and she can very clearly see the flaws, the ones who yearn to be seen, the ones who like need attention, the ones who feel lonely, whatever it is that she observes, she's not judging it. She's aware of it, right? And so in that is the same with ourselves. It's like it's not about perfection. It's like, oh, I'm aware of these things within me.
Yeah.
You know, these things that have pain, that yearn, that have wounding, that have glory, that have all these things. And she's more okay with having all of those things. Whereas I think that until we get to that point of acceptance and love for self, it's hard to be in the resonance of the wise woman, which is one of acceptance.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think at 20, or at least for me, when I was in my 20s, I was too busy with trying to be enough and learning enough and like, you know, being seen as enough, that the wise woman wasn't available to me because that's not where I was.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
As much as I wanted it,
Yes.
it was never coming.
I mean, exactly, because there was too much striving.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the wise woman is available to all of us. And I think that's what's happening with these younger women that I'm seeing. There's a level of acceptance with themselves. And it's not about showing that to anyone else. It's an internal state of like being okay with self. Not that they aren't striving to become better or to learn or to be inspired by, but it's sort of this interesting way of being with themselves and able to witness others that is older than their years. That is that resonance of the wise woman.
I want to come back to the point you said that there's not a lot of role models.
Yeah.
So I think in our society, when I say ours, I'm probably saying Western society. That was my point right at the beginning. Every wise woman I thought of or had been in relationship with were always Indigenous elders. So I guess my question is, how do we become role models then for our next generation? Because we understand that we haven't had it. How do we offer it?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And what does that look like? Because in my mind, you know, a wise woman, elder, Indigenous woman never wears makeup. You know, she wears sandals. She covers her body with they're nice clothes. But you know, they might not be the most flattering clothes. They might be handmade. Is it important as a wise woman?
Yeah, to sort of abnegate beauty in the self and all that stuff. Yeah. So to me, it's funny. To me, the wise woman comes in many different flavors, right? And as you said, that's a certain archetype, like that's a certain how it's been, I guess we've learned from or embodied, like we've seen examples of. Because a lot of the role models we have of women who are empowered in our culture, okay, which I'm talking about the cultural standpoint that we are talking about, so Western culture, let's just say, is one that's very in her masculine, right? She's achieving, she's doing things well, she's accomplishing, she's got things sorted, she has all the material things, she has power, right? So it's a very masculine defined archetype.
While running a family and looking after kids and making sure they're doing.
Yeah, so everything's perfect, right? She's got all this stuff handled. It's kind of exhausting, actually. So to me, the wise woman, in my opinion, has to do with that resonance of acceptance, love of self, and an awareness of other that isn't about proving yourself to them in any way. And it's about uplifting them sort of gently, you know? So it's like, it's not like pushing yourself into their field because you're like, you can be better, you should do this. It's more like noticing
oh, this person has trouble with showing their emotion. So I'm just going to sit with them and perhaps share a story or just be with them and ask a question and allow them to be however they are.
Yeah.
So you're not trying to force anything, but you're noticing it in the people around you, and they're open to it or they're not. And it's okay that they're not open to it because you're not trying to force,
Yeah.
but you're offering that sort of nurturing, that softness, and the strength of, you can do this. I see you. You can. And that kind of like championing of them that is there should they want it, right? But it's okay if they don't, because you're not trying to make anything happen. So that to me is part of it. And also a delight in the aspects of the woman, which has to do with the girl, the temptress, and the mother. So it has to do with the delight in beauty, in playing, all that sort of stuff, which is all the aspect of the feminine, and being okay with all that stuff. So to me, it's funny. I think a lot of women will reduce or diminish their own power because they're trying to chase a form of power that is dictated by our culture, which is youth obsessed and very, very heavily oriented to a certain beauty stereotype. And that's what a woman's power is. And it has to do with sexuality as well.
Yeah.
Which to me is like, once you're past like 35-ish, is kind of, it's very immature. I'm not suggesting that sexuality is unimportant. It is important. But it's like, how do you use that sexuality? So you're aware of it. You're aware of your own sexual energy within yourself. You're aware of its impact on others. Do you see what I'm saying? You're aware of that sexual energy, the power that it wields, but you're not trying to get something through it.
You're not trying to be noticed because
It's
of
a bit.
it.
And you're not trying to manipulate others through it. You don't need to, because you hold the wise woman. But it's more like, if you want to nourish that part of you, you can, because it gives you pleasure. Do you see what I'm saying? But it's not predatory.
Yes.
It's for you. It's just like the expression of beauty is something that you really enjoy. Like for me, I really love flowers, or I love my dresses. But it gives me pleasure. I'm not doing it because I'm trying to seduce anyone, please anyone else.
Project an image.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it gives me pleasure.
Yeah.
I like beauty. I like certain colors. Like whatever it is that gives you joy in terms of beauty and that expression of that, then you're doing it not because you're trying to prove anything or be better than or have power over anyone else. You're doing it because you celebrate the beauty in the world and your enjoyment of it.
Totally makes sense. I think I've felt a little bit like that myself, that only now am I starting to explore, I would call it the magnificence of being at this age.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like, God, youth really was wasted, on me. It took me this long to move into this phase where I can really enjoy the magnificence of being in the feminine body.
Yeah.
And everything that all the little gifts and treasures, because there are treasures that are there and have been waiting.
Yeah.
And that can be just by, like you say, silly little things like wearing really bright socks on my feet.
Yeah.
Because the colour. Whereas previously I would have been like, oh, that's not professional.
Yeah.
Who cares,
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what kind of like what you mean?
Yeah.
It's just having enjoyment in. And if I want to, I don't want to say anything crass on here, but like, let's just say I look at my droopy boobs and I think, I want to have a boob job for
Great.
me.
Yes. Great.
Because I want to look at this magnificent body.
Yeah.
And you look at it in its splendor in front of the mirror and say, cracking.
Yes.
I might be 50, whatever, but look at this bod.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not flawless.
Yes.
I've had 2 babies. I've got wrinkly belly. I've got stretch marks, whatever. But it's mine and I'm going to be in my glory of it.
Yeah,
Is
exactly.
that kind of like what you're talking about?
Exactly. Because there's so much judgment and so much like desire for things like, a boob job or whatever. It's very polarizing because some people feel like they really need it to be feminine.
Yeah.
Other people judge it because it's like a certain, like, I don't know, can be really exaggerated and distorted and that type of thing. But my point is, like, just like you said, I've had small boobs my whole life. And I really would like the experience of having a bigger chest. And it doesn't need to be like a double D, but I would just like to have bigger boobs. I actually feel like that would be fun for me to experience. Great. That's for you, And I also feel like, things like, if you like to feel like the softness of your skin and you like to pamper that for yourself, great, because it's a celebration of the body.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have that. And to like you said, enjoy the body. And if it makes you happy to have bright colored toe polish, great. And if you like the way that certain clothes hang on you because it feels good to you to have a certain way that you look, that's phenomenal. And it's for you. And so there's, to me, absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I think it's actually really glorious because it's like you have this magnificent opportunity to be the unique expression of you. What's it going to look like?
Yeah.
How colorful, how not colorful. It doesn't really matter, whatever your thing is, whatever you love. That's great.
And I wonder if that's kind of what you're recognizing in the younger generation, that they've given themselves more permission than maybe my generation did, because we had this, I don't know, linear, very masculine way to prove that you were worthy in society.
Yeah.
And perhaps something's changed along the way with all the work that's happening.
Yeah.
That these younger women can now just be in enjoyment and embrace that magic of being in the body in whatever way is right for them.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's really awesome. It's funny because I remember when I first started my corporate career, that was, like pantyhose were still appropriate. You know what I mean? Like you had to wear them. Like you couldn't show legs. I mean, this is, whenever that was, in the 90s or whatever it was, like that was still at the time. And so now that's changed a lot. And I think that it's really important for young women to be aware of like, well, there's the enjoyment of the body and the expression of beauty. And then there's like the doing it, because there's so much social media now for power, right? To get noticed, to have attention, to conform, because, you're like measuring yourself against this other standard. And it's not just young women, it's older women. It's like, it's so fascinating to me that in the beauty industry, it's almost always women of a certain age that are portrayed as the models. And it only isn't recently now with smaller brands that you're seeing women who are older, who are not dyeing their hair, who are like really beautiful actually. And they are of a different age and they're not trying to be younger. They're happy with who they are and they want to be beautiful in their own expression of their beauty. And I think that's really awesome because it's strange to always have this projection of this certain age of woman who is very young, often still in her teens, as the beauty standard, which is not the majority of women. And then all these older women feel like they have to chase that beauty standard, which really takes away from our power. Because if you're always chasing that external reference point of beauty when you're older, it's a losing battle. And you're never going to feel like you're enough. And you're never going to feel like you're in your power. And you're never going to feel whole and complete and beautiful. You will always feel like you're deficient. So the point that we're talking about of the wise woman is to recognize in you the glory of where you are in your journey physically. For many of us, postmenopausal, premenopausal, like right around there. What does that look like? How do I enjoy my body? Okay, and I mean that. Everybody else thinks about that as like sexual. It's so funny to me. And it can be great, but there's other things that you can do. And it's like a couple of years ago, I started strength training just for me because I noticed that I was taking a piece of luggage off an overhead bin and I noticed that it was hard for me. And I was like, oh, I don't like that feeling of weakness. So I started strength training and there's part of me that really enjoys the strength of my core. Is my belly perfectly flat with like ridges and such? No. I mean, I'm sure it is underneath all that other stuff on top of it. But it's not visible to the naked eye. So in any case, but I enjoy the strength of it. Do you know what I mean? No one sees it, but I can feel it in me. And that I love that part of my body because of that. It's sort of like, that's where my body is now. Do I need to have a perfectly flat belly? No. It's okay,
There's a liberation in that acceptance, right? And again, coming back to, I do feel like it's a frequency resonance.
Absolutely.
As well. And I guess my main question is there things that we can do to tap into that before the time? Or is it just a passage of time that we have to prepare ourselves frequency-wise for? I mean, what do you think about that?
I think it depends on the person, actually. I do feel like the more that you do frequency work, the more you actually fall in love with yourself. So I think that women don't have to wait as long as, say, you and I did, to get to this point. And I think that finally getting to a place where there is not only self-love, like first self-acceptance, then self-love, because I think self-love is a huge stretch for most people. And so I feel like once you start to have that, then the wise woman starts to rise.
Yeah.
Because she's like, okay, I understand myself. I am okay with all these aspects of me. It's all right that I want to get better, and I'm okay with all of this. And that starts to shift. So I feel like on a frequency resonance level, you don't have to wait as long anymore, which is great, to have the wisdom that a lot of these elders have had when they hit their 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
I think it can be much, because I would say that even for you and I, we're young compared to those women.
Yeah.
And I think that it can be even younger, which is really wonderful.
The next generation.
The next generation, yeah. And I think the wise woman is also about this level of, in that love of self and self-acceptance, not needing to be noticed, not needing to prove to anyone anything, not needing to like reveal one's power at all times or the level of awakening that you have or anything. Because again, there's that self-acceptance in there. So you're happy with you. You're just happy.
As you're talking as well, I'm wondering as well, this has been prophesized for a long time, that there's a moment in our consciousness where we move into the feminine, becoming not the power, but I'm not quite sure what the phrase means either, where we move into the feminine being in charge. And as you're talking, I'm wondering if this is the kind of shift that they've been talking about, where women move, we've kind of come convoluted. You know, we've gone like pendulum swing from here to here, trying to be the masculine, and now we're slowly coming back maybe to a point, pivoting in between there. And that shift was actually about women moving into all the aspects of themselves and having it available to them when they need it. And it's got me thinking, well, so what's happening for the male? Is the same thing going to happen for them?
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
so,
I know that's a bit out there, but
yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that the masculine is having trouble right now, in the Western culture anyway, like trying to define like what is masculine? Is it okay for me to be masculine? Because they've been emasculated a lot, right? In the male culture, it's not okay for them to be angry. There's the whole like, it's interesting to me to watch what's happening with the masculine, because there's a lot of confusion there too. It's not like it's just happening in the feminine. So I feel like in this time of confusion, part of it is the clarity that comes as more and more men do work like this, where they're clarifying who they are. And as a result, they're not trying to negate the feminine within, just like you and I don't negate the masculine within, because it's part of us. But they also are aware of the masculine clarifying, which also is very distorted, and about how to be in the masculine and the authority and the groundedness and the centeredness of that without being abusive. That's the piece that the masculine is sorting right now. It's like, can you have authority without being an asshole or without being oppressive or dominating another? Can you have that? And the answer is yes. But that is something I feel like that's clarifying in the masculine.
As we as women move into this aspect that doesn't need to be noticed by others outside of ourselves.
Exactly.
That we can come inside, and I guess you see love is a big stretch for people that are still in this process, but have that self-acceptance, because by doing the work you get the space and you actually get to touch you, who you are,
exactly.
Your true essence.
Exactly, and the same is happening in the masculine. So it's not like they need to announce at a very loud volume, I have my authority, I have my power. It's really clear. They also don't need to like assert it on anybody. You're just like, okay, that person clearly is very aware of who they are.
Yeah. So if I'm somebody watching this episode and I want to learn more about how I access that wise woman inside of me, instead of always looking outside, you know, that wise woman inside of me, what would your tips be for that?
Yeah. So I would suggest that there's a couple of episodes that we've done on the feminine. So I'd watch those. And what I would say is, as you clarify, your expression of the feminine will clarify. So for many women, because we've been so hyper-masculinized, a lot of the things we need to work on often has to do with surrender, okay, and being able to soften. So I would suggest there's a deep dive on surrender. So I would suggest that. I would also really suggest the Mastering Momentum, Mastering the 6 Core Essentials, because those are very, very valuable tools to help you to clarify yourself. Okay, so that's the very reason that we gave that particular class. because it's very much about self-empowerment, because you can do it. You don't need me to. You can help yourself. And so as a result, that one is extremely helpful to clarify really quickly on your own. And as you start to do that, you'll start to notice shifts within yourself. And as you clarify, you'll have permission to start to explore, express, and even be aware of an aspect of the feminine that you probably have not been aware of before, if this is something that you're seeking. So I would say those are the sort of fast tracks to getting to the wise woman.
Yeah.
If you would like to start your journey of being aware of and familiarizing yourself with the resonance of the wise woman and starting to amplify it, then I'd strongly suggest listening to the group frequency calibration meditation that's associated with this episode. If you've liked this episode and want to know what future episodes are dropping, then hit the subscribe button below. We're about to start the group frequency calibration, or GFC, where we actually do the frequency work and where change is catalyzed. To get to the GFC, click on the square that'll appear to the right or the link in the description below. It's time to bring in a new experience, a new consciousness, and a new world. Let's rise together.